Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So good to be with you, to introduce you to Masters in Photography, who form our panelists tonight. It's going to be a very colorful presentation. Although diverse in their approach, they do unite under our common theme, picturing the invisible. So let me introduce you to our stunning artists today, Erika Larson from New York City, Shannon Taggart from Brooklyn, New York, and Ammar Abdrabbo from Paris. We can't underestimate the role of our moderator of today's webinar, tackling highly admired people in their field, presenting to you the passionate Jolaine Frizzle. Jolaine Frizzle is a Dubai-based arts professional. She has a BA in art history and BFA degree in photography, and post-graduated with an MA in art history from the University of Western Ontario. She worked at various arts organizations and was appointed as a director at galleries in Zurich and London. Over the past 12 years, she has been managing a gallery, working with international artists, curating exhibitions, and participating in events around the world. In 2015, Frizzle relocated to Dubai and has worked at Leila Heller Gallery and the Third Line. She is currently director of the Institute for Emerging Art. Please let me again remind you to put your mics on mute and send your questions on the chat section. If you would like to ask in person, please follow your question by I ask. Jolaine will give you the chance to do so and in person. Thank you. Jolaine, the floor is yours.
Hello. I think you can hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. I want to, first of all, start by thanking Barbara, Lena, and the team at the Art Circle for inviting me to moderate this conversation. Tonight we have three world-renowned photographers to open our minds to their incredible visions and to share their works. We've titled this talk, Picturing the Invisible, to look at the desire to see that cannot be seen. It is not only a photographer's role to make visible what might be forgotten, it is also to share what cannot be seen because it is no longer present, it has been destroyed, or it is remote and not accessible. It is this concept of how to articulate the invisible that I would ask you to consider tonight. During each speaker's talk, ask yourself how each photographer goes about creating images of things that cannot be seen and how they strive to find expression for this invisible or unknown. Photography is a relatively modern idea. Around the mid-19th century, the invention of photography revealed that cultures were prepared to form knowledge, beliefs, and fantasies through optical, mechanically produced, and reproducible images. Photographs can be sources of knowledge, critical engagement, and aesthetic pleasure. They can determine and complicate ideas of place, stimulate creative experimentation, and amidst the accelerated pace of contemporary life, enable pause and reflection. The three photographers presented here tonight offer a broad range of the diverse field of contemporary practice, who are sharing a common element in the use of lens-based technology and light-sensitive materials in their various encounters. You will notice key among all these photographers' practice is the element of time. It seems as though they share a commonality that is picturing this invisible tends to require not only multiple exposures, but also a durational commitment that is in stark contrast to the instantaneous click of the camera shutter. Ammar has been photographing Syria since 1990. Shannon spent 18 years with the spiritualists, and during the 4 years that Erika lived with the Sami, she became fluent in the language. I'm sure you'll have several questions as our esteemed photographers make their presentations tonight. Just to remind you, as Lena just mentioned, for you to ask your questions in the comments section, and then we'll get the questions at the end of the presentations. And then also, if you want the I ask, I'll certainly call on you during that period. To begin, Shannon Taggart is a photographer based in Brooklyn. Her photographs have been exhibited and featured internationally, include within the publication Time New York, the New York Times Magazine, Discover, and Newsweek. Her work has been recognized by Nikon, Magnum Photographs, and the Inga Morath Foundation, American Photography, and the Alexia Foundation for World Peace. Her first book, monograph Seance, was listed as one of Time magazine's best photo books of 1990. She was speaking about this recent book, Seance, and how the challenge of photographing the religion of spiritualism relates to our topic of picturing the invisible. She became aware of spiritualism as a teenager when her cousin received a message from a medium that revealed details about her grandfather's death. In 2001, while working as a photojournalist, she began photographing what that message was received, Lilydale, New York, home to the world's largest spiritualist communities. Taggart expected to spend one summer figuring out the tricks of the spiritualist trade. Instead, spiritualism's mysterious processes, earnest practitioners, and neglected photographic histories became an inspiration. Her project evolved into an 18-year journey that has taken her around the world in search of ectoplasm, the elusive substance that is said to be both spiritual and material. Shannon, please tell us about your journey.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Can everybody see my screen and hear me as well? Good. Okay, so thank you for having me. This is a real honor to be here today. I'm going to talk about my recent monograph, Seance, which was published in 2019. And it's the culmination of an 18-year-long project on the religion of spiritualism, which is an American-born religion that believes that we can communicate with spirits of the dead. The entire body of work connects to this idea of picturing the invisible, and that's what I'll be exploring today. Let's see. Okay. So in 2001, I began photographing in the world's largest spiritualist community, a tiny little town called Lilydale, New York. And I thought I'd spend one summer making a quirky photo project about this strange little place. But to my surprise, at the end of that first summer, I realized my work was far from over. Now, before I share my own images of mediums and spiritualists in practice and speak about my own photographic experiences, I want to quickly introduce why spiritualism is important. Spiritualism was once a hugely popular movement in the Western world, and it has an astounding intellectual history. And these facts are now forgotten, but being rediscovered. Spiritualism had a profound effect on 19th century social reform, including the women's rights movement. Spiritualism inspired scientific experiments by some of the most famous scientists who have ever lived. And the practice of spiritualism even helped ignite the very birth of modern art. And these facts are now being acknowledged in the art world by art historians who are now contemplating the very history. Many important 19th century figures in all disciplines were connected with spiritualism, including the American President Abraham Lincoln and his wife. So spiritualism's sprawling intellectual history was my first big shock to discover. And my second was finding that spiritualism and photography had been connected since their early beginnings. And this intrinsic link between spiritualism and photography is a major theme within my book. Spiritualism's photographic past is one of the most bizarre, absurd, and uniquely unsettling chapters in the history of photography. And one of the most mind-blowing things to me was to realize that spiritualism was the first religion to use photography rather than painting to create a religious iconography. So spiritualists used photography to translate their invisible beliefs into the visible. And my own work became an attempt to build onto this very strange record. I was first drawn to spiritualism as a teenager when my cousin went to Lilydale, New York, and she got a very dramatic message from a medium who revealed the true story of my grandfather's death, which was unknown. It was a kind of a family secret. And since then, I became deeply curious, how could a total stranger possibly know such a thing that had happened so long ago and affected my entire family so deeply? And so this personal event led me to Lilydale, and I was working as a photojournalist at the time for newspapers, and I wanted a project that I could really be creative with. And again, I thought I'd be there a couple weeks. And at first, I could not understand how these same people were telling me they could talk with dead people. But I was so curious about their beliefs and their lives. And I wanted to learn everything I could about spiritualism and mediumship. And I just wandered around the town and knocked on doors and asked people to teach me about their lives and their beliefs. And they very graciously did. I wandered around endlessly making pictures, just photographing everything I saw in Lilydale. Healings, spoon bending classes. And eventually I got the nerve to ask mediums if I could sit in on their readings. But I was constantly questioning, how do you photograph spiritualism? How do you photograph the exchange between an invisible presence and a visible body? And eventually I was allowed to bring my cameras into seance situations, but I struggled with how to be true to the psychological reality of these events and all this charged atmosphere and all this invisible activity. And soon I became to have a few happy accidents with my camera, accidental pictures. This is one where I was in this situation and this woman was holding a red flashlight and we were told to focus on her and see what we saw. Everyone in the room was describing this second face right next to hers that looked like her, but it wasn't her. Oh, maybe it's your doppelganger. Maybe it's your etheric double, one of your ancestors, your grandmother. I did not see this other face. I saw a woman holding a flashlight. And when I got my film back, I got this accidental image, which I realized was created by my camera shutter, but it was more psychologically true to the event than any photograph I could have conceived with my mind. And I found this accident thrilling, and it was synchronistic and it was uncanny, and it felt as if I'd opened a door to someplace else. And this is another early accidental photograph where I was in the Lilydale Museum and I took pictures of this woman, and I got on two different rolls of film, this purple orb right by her at the same spot near her body in the two different frames. I brought the pictures back and I said, I got these weird pictures of you. I thought you might find them interesting. And she said, oh, that's my husband, Bob. And this moment was huge for me because I never thought of assigning meaning to a photographic anomaly. As a photographer, you're trained to keep these things out of your pictures, to control the medium like a master, and to not have such things. So this idea of embracing photographic accidents became important. But it was also in that Lilydale Museum where I was first introduced to spirit photographs. These images were, I had never heard of them before. They were not in the textbooks I studied from, and I became fascinated by them. I was blown away by their oddness and their absurdity and their outrageousness and their silliness and their tenderness and how they spoke about grief and love and loss. But it was pictures of spiritualist mediums in action that became of most interest to me. And discovering ectoplasm, the bodily excretion that was said to morph into form, that really blew my mind. I found the photographs of ectoplasm particularly shocking. These images were so highly strange and grotesque, and sometimes oddly beautiful. And they were the most uniquely unsettling photographs I had ever encountered. And I desperately wanted to decode these images. I wanted to understand the meaning behind these pictures that were so intense. I wanted to know what ectoplasm even was. So I think for many of us in America, myself included, there is a popular movie, Ghostbusters, and this is the first place I heard of ectoplasm when I saw this movie as a child. And what many people don't know is Dan Aykroyd, the creator of Ghostbusters, is a fourth generation spiritualist. He's drawing the term directly from spiritualist practice. So there's this cultural awareness of ectoplasm that is detached from spiritualism. People have heard of ectoplasm, but they have no idea what it really means. So the word ectoplasm is taken from the Greek ektos plus plasma, meaning outside formed. It's a paradox. It's a substance that is supposed to be both spiritual and material. Spiritualists believe that ectoplasm connects it merges the realms of life and death. I became obsessed with the question, are there mediums out there still trying to produce ectoplasm somewhere? And I just had to find out. So I traveled to a spiritualist learning center in England in 2003 to attend a seance class about ectoplasm. This was my seance classroom that I walked into. And I finally saw a real medium's cabinet, which is the device mediums use to produce ectoplasm. And, you know, we were taught about the cabinet. We each had to sit in it, and we were told that only the best mediums could produce ectoplasm. It's a very dangerous process. We all had to try. But midweek, there was no ectoplasm happening. And our teacher told us that we were all terrible mediums, and that he was a good one, but we were sullying this ectoplasmic atmosphere. So we were so bad, we were making it impossible. And the closest we came to ectoplasm was this joke. One of the other students came in with toilet tissue, imitating the pictures, and collapsed in her chair and said, "Oh, look, I got some." And this wax mold, that's as close as I got to ectoplasm. So I became very frustrated with the topic of spiritualism. I thought it was something you maybe shouldn't even try to photograph. I had no idea what I was going to do with my project. I abandoned it. But I couldn't stop thinking about spiritualism, and I took a break and I started learning all about the history, reading about parapsychology, studying what was going on in the world in spiritualism. And I found out that there were people using cameras in seance rooms. It's a practice called ITC. And I became really inspired by this visionary use of photography in seance rooms, and how the photographic material was also almost being used as like a holy material or religious relic for messages. And I wanted to learn about spiritualists using photography and different technology. And I sought out these practitioners. And this is one medium that I've been working with for quite some time, named Sylvia Howarth. And her own works inspired my own. This is Sylvia in creating spirit art. This is a camera obscura seance room she built. This is her using an Xbox Connect camera to talk to spirits. So Sylvia's videos of herself and these corrupted screen grabs inspired this idea of showing Sylvia morphing or deconstructing within my own work, or this masking. So her works inspired my own. So I eventually began traveling all over the world, seeking out mediums who told me they were trying to produce ectoplasm. And I found, surprisingly enough, that most of these mediums, when they said ectoplasm, they were talking about an invisible force that acted on their body. And so I experimented with long exposure, with accidental pictures to try to show these invisible situations, experimenting with light and time. And I sought to make photographs that contained both mechanical and spiritual explanations, requiring an interpretation to be made by the viewer. This approach considers the conjuring powers of photography itself. The narrative of my book is built around my search for classical ectoplasm and trying to find what I saw in those vintage images. And I eventually did find that. And I began in 2008, I started corresponding with one of the most famous and controversial mediums in the world. He's a man named Kai Mugi from Germany. He is despised by many in the spiritualist community because he does produce classical ectoplasm in his seances, and he travels around the world doing this. So in 2013, I had my first opportunity to photograph Kai, who was different from the other ectoplasm mediums. When Kai said he produced ectoplasm, he meant exactly like the white gauzy streams I saw in those vintage images. Oh, I don't know, I have something on my screen. It was a truly surreal experience, like watching the vintage photographs jump to life right in front of my eyes. According to Kai, ectoplasm can be seen as a device, a screen for projection, a place to put the unarticulated, According to Kai, ectoplasm can act as a physical place for the unspeakable. Kai calls ectoplasm the ultimate face of the supernatural. He describes it as a flesh that is literally born, a living, breathing substance. Whoops, sorry. I asked Kai why. What is the purpose of these seances? What is the purpose of producing ectoplasm? He told me there are two reasons. One, ectoplasm has healing powers. The healing is a byproduct that comes about through simply trying to merge the spiritual and the material realms. And the second was to get people out of their own heads. Kai ambiguously states, and I quote, "We are not trying to make anyone believe anything. We are just happy if at least they have one thought outside of their normal thought pattern during our seance." And unfortunately, I have to leave us on a cliffhanger because of time. But my chapter on Kai ends with this funny and dramatic story of how I traveled to Switzerland to photograph his most scandalous ectoplasmic seance to date, where he was presenting fully formed spirits in the seance room. And that is the end, and I thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. That was fantastic. I'm sure everyone is imagining the one thought that wouldn't be, you know, that would be created tonight that they didn't think they had. I think you've given them more than one.
Thank you.
I want to move on to Erica. Erica Lawson is a multidisciplinary storyteller fascinated by the way people communicate with the natural world. Her monograph, Sammy Walking with Reindeer, a reflection of her time living in the Scandinavian Arctic, was published in 2013. During this time, she'd been a Fulbright Fellow for her study of the North Sami language. Erica was a 2017 Fellow with the National Geographic Society for an ongoing project exploring how communities maintain close ties to the natural communities, that maintain close ties to nature, communicate this relationship through ritual. Her work has been included in the Smithsonian, the National Portrait Gallery, the National Geographic Society, Fotografiska Museum in Sweden, and the United States Embassy in Oslo. When we were discussing the topic of picturing the invisible, she mentioned that she believes that we say more in silence. She believes more in what she feels than what she sees. She uses the camera as a tool to access what cannot be said in words and to help penetrate the visible. She believes that this relates to her entire practice of storytelling and in general to the way she engages with the world around her. Her images are moments of a collective story that pass through and around her, a way to remember who we are. Today, she's presenting her work following the Sami reindeer herders across the Scandinavian Arctic and seeks to make apparent the invisible presence of a remote community and their ritual practices. Erica?
Thank you. That's a beautiful introduction. Thank you. And thank you, Shannon. I just want to say Shannon and I have been friends for over 20 years, 25 years, I think. So I am so honored to get to be here with her. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So I just want to start off by just even questioning what is the invisible. And the invisible has many things, but for me, it's actually a mirror. It's a mirror of who we are, what we're searching for, what we're trying to remember. It's feeling, love, it's all of these things. So it's a really broad topic. I came to photography through this image right here. My father was one of the designers of the Hubble Space Telescope. And when I was young, he started to bring home the physical pictures that were coming back. And remember, there was a time when we never saw Saturn, right? We knew it was there, but we never saw it. So this telescope or this camera was able to bring us something that was so far away, so close to us. But in this moment, it was something more visceral for me. I actually felt when I held the picture that Saturn was a part of me and that I was a part of it. So in that moment, I thought, okay, the camera must be a type of magic to bring me into something, to remind me the things that are me, that I have somehow forgotten. In my early 20s, I started to use the camera as a way to get to know my family, right? We live with our family all of our lives, but the camera became a way for me to understand them in a different way. And this was my grandmother, my father's mother. And I had taken this picture, and I realized when I saw the picture that it wouldn't be so long before she would die. And the picture would show me that. So in this moment, it was that part of us around us, these inevitable cycles of life and death that the camera could give us a little bit more clarity about. And within the next year, my grandmother would die. This is actually the deathbed of my other grandmother, just minutes after they took her body. And when I saw the image, I could tell that she had been leaving. Of course, I was there and I experienced it, but the image also showed me that, her leaving, what that was like. There's this moment between the transitional moments. And this was taken at that same day that my grandmother died. And I use a large format field camera. I very often use film. And this is a picture of my sister, my niece, and my niece's dog. And these are my fingers that went over the camera lens. And I thought in this moment, when I got my film back, that this was the eyes of my grandmother leaving. But what would come to be the most important thing, and what I would realize about photography throughout my life, is that photography gives us the ability to transcend time, to realize that time isn't linear, and that it could remind us of who we are, but it could also tell us about the future. And within the next 10 years, both my sister, my niece, and the dog would die. And I realized that the camera could give us these moments to experience our grief and our relationship to death in like I want to say it's almost in a beautiful way. It gives us moments before it just hits us, right? To continually remind us that we are parts of these cycles of life and death. And my other sister had a near-death experience when she was about 15. I'm quite a bit older than her. And I realized the camera, when she came back home, she couldn't explain this experience. So we used the camera as a way for her to speak to me without words, a way for her to remember the experience. And so that's what I meant when Jolene said that in silence, I hear so much more. So I realized that in about 2000, let me think, where was I? 2007, something like this. I realized I had been living in New York, and I had been working for Time magazine. I was focusing a lot on themes around life and death within sort of domestic situations in the US. But what I realized is there was so much noise around me, and that I needed to become silent again in order to hear. And I thought that I could find that silence in the Arctic. And so I ended up going to the Arctic and ultimately staying for 4 years, living with a family of Sami reindeer herders. And something that would begin to happen in all my images over my projects over the coming years would be this portal. There'd be a picture like this, where I would actually see a mirror, a reflection, but then I would also realize that it was a portal to enter another world. Perhaps it was the world, my interior world, but perhaps it's this world where time doesn't exist, or time exists in a different way. Perhaps it's the world of Saturn. These different questions I had in my mind. And something that would happen in my time with the Sami is that I would, for the first time in my life, not see a horizon line. And that changed everything. I would never say that I could perceive a world through other people's eyes, but through the Sami guiding me into their world and putting me in these kind of complete whiteouts, they actually broke my perception of time. There would be moments where I could sit and see hours and hours, and I didn't know if I was there for 5 minutes or 2 days. And what would happen in that, this would go on for years. And so eventually, like was mentioned before, I would learn Sami language. So I learned North Sami language, which has about 12,000 speakers, but it has more words to describe the natural world, the other language. But a word that was really important to me, and what would happen as I would start to think in Sami language, was this. So the word I live here, in Sami it's munorondahpe, but in English it means I live here, right? Perhaps I live in my physical house. But in Sami, this means I dwell here for a small time until this no longer sustains me, and so I'll move somewhere else. Perhaps I'll live here again, but that's not important. And so what I realized is as these words, as this translations of these words became a part of my body, my pictures would reflect it. So the houses, physical things that the Sami had created would almost float away in my images. And it was only the natural world that would stay, but even within its cycles of life and death, you would begin to see these. So things, colors, emotions would sort of begin to float. The Sami would have this ability to show me their ancestors, but their ancestors through story, through fire, through their belief in their connection to the natural world. And as I could see, when they would discuss this, sometimes I could see 600 years back. And then what I'd notice is my photographs would no longer, of the people would no longer hold a general time. Perhaps it was 200 years ago, perhaps it was now. And the Northern Lights was a way for them to enter the other worlds. And this is when the storytelling, like stories would be told in Sami, the Northern Lights would come and we would all be transported. After this story, I would come back to the US and I had gotten this assignment for National Geographic to follow the horse into Native American culture. I would work on over 21 reservations in the United States. But the importance of this was that I would begin to understand how an animal and how a relationship to an animal could help people express who they are as a culture. And what I would notice is when people would talk to me about their ancestors, who they are now, their hopes for the next 7 generations, I get this film glare on all of my film. And it's something, this would begin to happen in many of my work. And I realized as people would discuss the things that were most important to the things they were connected to, their image would become less important. And the Sami actually say something that nothing belongs to them, right? Even their artwork belongs to that which they're paying reverence to. So as people would pay reverence to the things that were important, their physical manifestation would disappear. This man, Jones Benali, we were out just making a portrait. And I remember him looking at me and saying, "Did you get it?" And similar to Shannon's experience, I didn't even know what he meant. And when I got the images back, the lightning was there. And in the car ride back, he would say to me, you know, the lightning is where we come from. It's the power of all creation. And the white horse is, the white horse holds the power of the lightning. And so these images would be a way for him to have not just to ask me, did you get it? But that entire story could be translated through the image. But his words really held, they were quite ephemeral, the words, right? This man, the day that I went to photograph him, it was this bright sunny day. He only had half an hour. And I was kind of frustrated, right? The harsh sun. And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I just, you know, it's such harsh sun. I'd love to photograph you, but it wasn't so bright." And he said, "Well, let me tell you a story." And he said, "My grandfather's name is Pile of Clouds." And as he began to tell this story, the clouds would come in, and I took several images. When he finished the story, the clouds were gone. And I also just want to say this thing about invisible is really important, because the invisible is just in our daily life. It's the most important ritual of our daily life, how we show love, how we show tenderness, how we show our connection to things. Those things are invisible, but it is what makes us human. And I think it is what carries in our backpack on our human journey. I'm going to go faster because we're getting towards the end here. So as I mentioned, I was a fellow with National Geographic Society, and they funded this work about ritual and how this exploration of ritual is a way for us to describe what's happening in the world today. And actually, I believe it's led us to what we are experiencing now, of this sort of liminal space, this time of transition as we become from one to another, and as we evolve in different aspects of ourselves. So I went to photograph from Western Arctic all the way down to Tierra del Fuego, ritual. And again, as you can see here, this portal into another world, the rituals around death and our transitions. The kitchen. So in the Huachole tradition, the woman is the only one who builds her kitchen. And in the kitchen, actually the seed of life happens. Fertility, the feeding. of skin. So I've worked with cultures for over 20 years that use skin, and they always say this connects us to our ancestors, it connects us to life. When we sew skin, we never know what we're going to create. It will help us create what it's meant to create, but it also can be passed down, right? Skin is living. So even, you know, when we pass it down to our children, it is, these spirits are still living within it. And I would photograph ritual, right? So these things that we think somehow are invisible, but the transitions, similar to what Shannon does. And many people, because of colonization or just the different aspects of outside culture into their cultures, have sort of broken these connections with things that they were much clearer, perhaps they would say, or things that they feel like they've been asleep for a while, but into some time of evening. But in teach traditions. So for instance, in this, the Watoto who live in Peru, they had this way to transform into jaguars. And it was the most important, not because they would kill a jaguar, but because they could take on the power of the jaguar in order to hunt or to sustain themselves. But they've always considered themselves jaguar people, but have lost this connection to shapeshift. So now what they've decided to do to teach this tradition again, and some of this, sorry, what I want to say is some of this connection is a break with landscape. So as they've been moved to other areas, so that connection with the actual physical aspects of the earth break this connection. So they've begun to make these masks to help teach the youth to transform again. So as Shannon had also mentioned, the mask is really important. It's a way for us to connect with these invisible manifestations of that which we reflect. And I'm going to end here with the time of COVID. So I had been told on this journey with ritual that we would come into a huge time of awakening, of transition, of death, of consciousness evolution. And so I took this time over the past few months, and I actually didn't create very much. I felt myself become almost like a cocoon. But I did go out and do small reflections around my home. And these were the images that were created. So I would say this was my invisible interpretation of my own transformation during this time. And to hear again with new ears now, to begin to feel in a new way. And the last, when we begin to realize that the physical body is only one thing, right? When we can actually begin to see ourselves from the inside out, what does that look like? So this is my self-portrait. And thank you so much.
Wow, 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 incredible. I love the idea of the last self-portrait where you feel like your power is coming out. And I think that's what's really the idea of the liminal space and how we're in this moment of change. I mean, I think all of us are sort of starting to see that we have that within us. It's really exciting work. Wow, amazing. We're going to move on to Amar. And I think that we're you know, it's such a pleasure tonight because everyone has such different practices, although there's some commonalities. I think that you're getting such a beautiful journey through so many different landscapes and lenses of what's going on. Amar was born in Damascus in 1966. He lived in Libya and Lebanon, and then ultimately got to France when he was 12. As one of the Arab world's most prominent photographers, he's been widely published in publications such as Time Magazine, The Paris Match, Der Spiegel, Le Monde, and Asharq al-Awsat's. Moreover, his photographs have appeared on more than 60 magazine covers, and his virtual gallery on Flickr have more than 3 million visitors. From an almost 30-year career, his portfolio amassed intimate portraits of heads of states, war coverage in Iraq, Lebanon, and Libya, and world-renowned celebrities like Michael Jackson, as well as high society events such as the Cannes Film Festival and Paris Fashion Week. In 2012, Amar's first solo exhibition, Coming Soon, was held in IM Gallery in Beirut, followed by the exhibition Follow the Leader at IM Gallery in Dubai's DIFC. I'm not sure if any of you were able to see that work then. More recently, many of his works address censorship, body freedom, the nude, women's empowerment, gay rights, etc. His work on Aleppo in the wartime has been widely published and exhibited, and curated by the graffiti artist Banksy. One of his photographs was displayed at Disneyland theme park near Bristol in September 2015. In Paris in 2018, Amar was awarded knighthood by France in recognition of his work, including his coverage of the conflicts in Syria and Iraq. A chronicler of life's events, capturing moments from the street to the world's nobility and celebrated figures, Amar's images rely on just enough information to set the scene, yet with an unfailing artistic eye, his intriguing compositions retain a graphic beauty. Amar, let's get on to your body of work.
Thank you, Jolene, for this introduction, and thank you, Lina, and Nada, and Huda, and everybody for organizing, and thanks to everybody for attending this this panel. First of all, I'm quite, how you say that, humble to come after Shannon and Erica. Erica, who was very touching and moving when she was talking about her sister, and Shannon really scared me a little bit with all these ghosts and spiritism images. So I might be very much terre à terre, let's say, very much down to earth now. But let me show you how the invisible, or picturing the invisible, works for me. So first of all, to complete complete Jolene's presentation, I need to tell you, or I have to tell you, that I was, since I've been 12, let's say, I wanted to be a journalist, a reporter, and it's only later that I came into photo to tell stories, and because I realized photography was a language in itself. I mean, when you do a very good piece, if you're a writer, this piece might be translated in few other languages, but not that much. While a photo is instantly, can be shared, can be appreciated, can be loved or hated by many people from different cultures. And that was very much amazing and appealing for me. So I switched to photo 30 years ago, and in these 30 years, I've done very different things, as you mentioned. So we'll have a quick look today on some of the things. Also saying, because I'm very happy to have this photography panel, that I want you also to think about photographers today, because we are all extremely photographing all the time. We've never been so much, there've never been so much photo all the time, but very little photographers manage to live out of it, and it's more and more complicated for them. It's a very big contradiction of our time. But having said this, let's go to see the work, if it works. Okay. I don't know if you have, all of you, you see the screen? Okay. So as I was telling you, in these 30 years, there are a lot of different things, as you can see here, a little bit of war, many portraits of head of states or important people, and some situations like Cannes Film Festival, etc. I had the chance to have some of my work. Oh, I don't know what happened. Sorry for this. Okay. I had the chance to have some of my work shown in museums and in exhibitions, and belong to some collections today. While you will see that many of the works that will be shown here have not been done as artworks. They were done as document. It was done to for the press, and none of them were done to be exhibited or to be shown. I don't know, there's something on my screen. Do you have the same? It's a bit weird, yellow. No, you do have it? Yeah, I don't know where it comes from, but I don't know if I can erase it or something. No, I cannot. Well, it's a pity.
Ammar, I
Yeah,
think drawing on your screen, you know, there's this little pencil to the left.
yeah.
Okay, if you can, okay, now there's nothing, no.
I see it
I,
somewhere here down, but well, if it's
yeah,
not disturbing you, I'll try not to have more.
fine.
I think Shannon had the same issue and it's a bit disturbing, but no big deal. Let's go on. Yeah, so I was telling you these were not done to be artworks, but they end up sometimes in exhibitions and museums. And this job is amazing because it took me from very funny or weird places like war, like here in Kosovo and 20 years ago, or like here in Cannes Film Festival, where you can see also the actor Adrian Brody, and I'm trying to shout to get his attention. So now to go to the invisible. In my job, usually we are here to photograph the visible, what people see, what they want to see. I mean, like the winner of a contest or the winner of a match or the one who is being awarded or the etc. etc. So you always have to see the visible, not the invisible. But sometimes you get to see something like this, like in Damascus 20 years ago when the Syrian president Assad died. The authorities were hiding anything that had a smile in the city. Like this is a shampoo advertisement, and it's been hiding. They are trying to hide it with black material so that people don't get to see anything smiling, which is something extremely Orwell, Big Brother application. I mean, we rarely see something like this. So this was supposed to be invisible, and I managed to capture it, and it's very interesting. Sometimes we have to capture, let's say, um, people who are you don't get to see a lot. Like for instance, in Aleppo, Jolaine mentioned the work in Syria. In Aleppo, people usually always talk only about the fighters, the army or versus the rebels versus Daesh or Islamic State, etc., etc. I went to Aleppo and I wanted to see the invisible people. Who are the people that nobody see? Like these are actors who are they're doing a sitcom, something funny, in the rubbles of Aleppo. So that was my intention also, to bring these people more into the light and to show exactly how they live. I realized that many people, when I come back from Syria, like these two schoolgirls going to school and eating chips on the way to the school, I realized when I come back from Aleppo and I am in a dinner, for instance, nobody in the dinner would tell me where is this army or where's this militia or what's going on the front. But many people tell me, how do people live? How do they buy food? Do they cook? Do they have TV? Do they have, I mean, questions were very practical, and people are interested in other people, humanity. And that was what I wanted to show. And that was very often invisible in the press. So these are the people from Aleppo. Also, what is very often the case when you come to war is that the invisible is also what is the terrible, let's say, what you cannot show because it's too tough, it's too ugly, it's too terrible. Like this picture in Iraq when discovering a mass grave. I know it's a tough picture, but it's part of our discussion. So it's a body of a man, and there were a lot of these. Of course, we tend to show the war in sometimes very graphic, very nice way, like this photo in Beirut in 2006 after an Israeli shelling on an area, Shayah, or this picture also in Iraq in 2003, a shelling on Baghdad. So there, we tend to get aesthetic, beautiful photos, um, and to show war in a nice way, more or less. I mean, even if it's not that nice, but aesthetic, acceptable, that can be in the magazines. And we get also the people on the ground who are not happy with that. You know, they tell us, show how ugly it is, show how terrible it is, show how, when you arrive to this place, you've seen arms or legs or something and you had to work on them. You have to show this. Don't show something nice. Don't show something beautiful. It is a real problem. It's a real question because the Western audience usually, I mean, the main audience for media don't want to see things that terrible. So we tend to present war in these nice pictures, let's say. But in this way, we are also hiding something, letting the invisible keep being invisible. How do we do? Also, I had sometimes some questions about these pictures where something symbolic. This might remind me of one of Shannon photos earlier. So that was Jean-Michel Jarre, a French musician, who was, well, I don't read the caption, but Jean-Michel Jarre wanted a photo. He was doing a concert in Athens at the Acropolis, and he wanted a photo, something about time that goes by, time that passes. And we managed to find this way, so with a very long pose. I mean, with a long time of pose, he passes, and then you have the two. He's in two places in the photo, but without any spiritism. It's just a camera play, and it's all photographers know how to do this. And so that way also the audience, for instance, sometimes the public, watch this picture of Michael Jackson during a concert in Munich, and they see in it. I mean, for me, it's just a photo of Michael Jackson at the concert, but people see something invisible to the eye, but they see the weakness and the loneliness of the artist. And this picture was a lot published after he passed away, after he died, because it was very much something that talked about his loneliness. Same here in this photo in Hama in Syria, of these huge water wheels, the Noria of Hama. And the young people there, they have fun by going on the water wheel and then jumping in the river when they arrive up there. So this is what we see, but the invisible that we don't see, but many people did when Ayam Gallery a few years ago put it on sale, and they saw the freedom, because the way the guy is flying, or the way he is not at all into, like, say, the attraction of the earth or something like that, made this photo very special. While when I did it, I didn't think at all about the freedom at that moment. You also have a similar photo that same day in the same area, like this. And here also many people saw freedom, but they saw also poverty, the way the kid is jumping with his shoes on, with the way the kids are having fun in the river. It says also a lot about the lack maybe of infrastructure for a swimming pool, or of having fun when you have to pay money, etc., etc., etc. Also in Aleppo, this photo of a rainbow in 2013 in the middle of the war, and many people saw in it something that was invisible for me. It's hope, because it's the rainbow, etc., was hope for them. Here also a photo from Syria, of these people who are widely invisible, I mean, or unknown, let's say, because when I showed this picture, many people were extremely surprised or shocked, because it's they're Arab Christians from Syria, from the area of Jazire or Deir ez-Zor, and for many people, Arab and Christians don't match. You know, either they are Arabs, so Muslims, or Christian, supposedly Europeans or Westerners, but there are many Arab Christians, of course. Let me go faster. I see that time is running. This is a photo also from Mecca in Saudi Arabia, that shows faith, let's say. Many people see faith in it. It's just people praying and you see their shadow. Also difficult sometimes to show the humor you have, like here in Aleppo, there's this sign that says, watch it. To the left, there are paradise and virgins. So of course it was a way of joking about the danger of the street. It's on the front line. But many people, when I showed it in exhibitions, did not see the joke of it and said, oh, these people are totally crazy and they believe in virgins and etc. etc. Also, I like a lot in these photos, a series of photos of from Aleppo again, the invisible, let's say, when there's a shelling and the hole like this in the building, and then you have an idea of how people used to live. It's terrible, especially this one, when you see that the teapot is still there while everything is gone, the stones and the wall, but the teapot is still there. I don't know how. Also very funny about the invisible here, this photo in the souk of Aleppo, and destroyed and burned. And then you have some people who saw something like this, a figure of like Darth Vader or something like that, in the ceiling, let's say, of the. I haven't seen it at all, to be honest, but many people, especially kids, saw it in some exhibitions and reported it to me. And it's funny because then many people see only this, they don't see anything else anymore. Again, one photo from Aleppo with a wall of protection against sniper. I go very fast, the same. This is interesting also, just a statue of Saddam Hussein in Iraq that lost its head. But here also many people saw the symbol of our countries where there's no head anymore, but still showing the direction. This is also about the Barbie doll in Syria that is veiled with a kind of chador. And it's a best-selling toy at that time, 2005, 15 years ago. It says also a lot about what's hidden, what you don't see in the picture. I could go on for a long time, but let me just go to something very funny, like something like this. For instance, it's Al Walid. He's a Saudi billionaire, very well known. He owns banks, he owns hotels in the world, etc. And he owns part of Euro Disney in Paris, Disneyland. And I asked him if he would pose with Mickey or Donald Duck or something like that, and he agreed. So the invisible here is his child spirit, you know, the child spirit that he didn't kill yet. It's still, I mean, the guy could be a billionaire, he could own many things, but he is ready to pose with Mickey Mouse for a photo. So I also wanted to show this. And just to finish, something about the size also. I go with Stephen Hawking. It's not but the size sometimes to show something invisible, like to talk about the religion in Saudi Arabia. I could show this. You play with the size of the frame. I mean, the way you frame the picture, and you have the king of Saudi Arabia, but a huge fabric behind him that talks about religion. Or this soldier, US soldier in Baghdad. Also, again, you have the huge wall of Babylon or something like that on one of the houses of Saddam Hussein's son. And the way the soldier is seated, the gun on the statue, etc., says also a lot. So on the picture, you have just a soldier relaxing, but the invisible, let's say, is more like the Iraqi civilization on this little soldier. And I finish with these coming soon photos about the invisible. Again, is in the body in the Arab world, the body of a pregnant woman that I had the pleasure to show at Ayam Gallery in Beirut in 2012. And that, for many people, that was totally something invisible. They haven't seen it before, and they were very shocked, or amused, or they liked it. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Wow. What a great, it was really, we've gone through from celebrity to really horrific images from war. And it really reminds me, Amar and I had a conversation a little bit before this talk tonight about the sort of movements in photojournalism and how there's this notion of truth and this notion of subjectivity and objectivity that's really kind of come up in sort of contemporary discourse. And I think you really addressed a lot of those kinds of concerns, you know, what the West wants in terms of, you know, how they want a beautiful picture of a burning city in relation to what you're actually seeing and what's on the ground there. And I think it's really interesting to sort of hear you talk about, you know, having to walk back arms and legs and all these kind of physical things, but knowing that that's not the representation that people want. I think it's a really interesting experience of this sort of truth telling in photojournalism today. And I really appreciated you speaking about that amongst Michael Jackson and other things. It's really, you've had quite an interesting career. I also want to start maybe asking a question to all of you. And because I think that everyone hasn't had, we haven't had a lot of questions in the chats yet, but I'd like to start getting the questions going. But before we do, I want to just sort of maybe ask all of you a little bit about, I mean, I think it was Erica had sort of talked about COVID and how that affected you. But I think that I'd like to be asking, you know, how COVID has impacted you personally and professionally, and what impact the pandemic has had on the photographic world in which of you operate. I wonder if you could talk about your situation, but also the communities, both the ones that you've introduced us today, and then sort of the larger communities that you're sort of part of. Maybe Shannon, do you want to start?
Yes. So for me, I'm actually, right now I'm away from New York City, and I'm in staying at in the Midwest. I lost all my photographic work in New York. And my husband's also a photographer, so he's able to shoot more easily here and do remote than it is in New York right now. So my life has been changed a lot by COVID. I've taken this time to actually start a new project where I'm actually meeting online with some of the mediums that I worked with in the book, and we're doing experiments online in Zoom rooms. Then I'm photographing screens, so it's allowing me to play with this spiritual shadow of technology in a wholly strange new way, which I wasn't expecting. So I have been doing that, and I'm actually using the time to do research for my next project, which is an archival project. And I'm thankful to have the time to do more research, and my project on spiritualism had turned me into a researcher unexpectedly, and I enjoy that role now and doing writing. So that's where I am.
Erica?
So yeah, from like the really personal level, I think after the first few days when I kind of knew, so I also lost all my work like overnight. And I think it took me a couple of days to feel comfortable in my skin about that. But then I realized, what can I really do? You know, so I actually began to listen to my own work that I had been leading me up to this moment, and realized, okay, I think I have to sort of dive into this wave of transition. And so I've seen a huge actual, like, almost new way to look at my own work and interpret it. So I actually feel like there's like a learning of a new language and of interpretation of the outside world that's happened during this time. And I think for me, it's probably on a very personal level exactly what this time is for all of us to, it's putting up a mirror on a really individual level of what it means to be human. So that being said, that's on a personal level. On a practical level, it's difficult for everybody economically, thinking about how you sort of function in these times. The communities that, several of the communities I've worked with, especially the rainforest communities. So my husband's from Peru. I work a lot in Peru often and in the rainforest, and they've been hit really, really hard. So I've been doing some print sales to just, I mean, it's not even much money at all, just to you know, for people to have some access to some transportation for medicine or things like this. But I'm one of many that are doing this. But yeah, so some of the more remote villages that I work in, if the COVID's hit, it's hit really hard. Some actually have been really isolated and there's been 0 cases whatsoever. So it's kind of balanced in a way. If they've been really remote, it's hit them really hard, or they've fared really well because nothing has gotten there. So I'm seeing that in relation to the work as well. So.
I'm sorry to hear that, but yeah, it's an interesting time we're living through. Amar, what about you? Have you also found that your work has been drying up?
Yes, unfortunately, many assignments and many jobs have been cancelled in a couple of days. Of course, no film festivals, no portraits, nothing for a while. Hopefully, it will be back in September because anyway, July, August are a bit dead season. But we don't know yet. You have to be supportive. You have to think about. I mean, we have also. I have the chance to be in Paris, in France, where there are some government support for artists and for people who don't have salaries or who don't belong to the liberalism society, or they don't have sales, things like that. But still, it is quite difficult time. Yes.
Yeah, I wish you all the best. I know that we all are hoping in the arts community that things will move forward and move up again. It's interesting though, because I think the photography community, because there is this impression that people can just point and shoot, and you know, whether it's the citizen-led reportage or you know things like that, that I think that the professional photography seems to be, you know, sliding out, and magazines seem to be slowing down, and distribution starts going. So I feel like it's you know, evolving into something different, but I think it really is a change of what's going to happen. There's a question here for Shannon. She said, it's Hanadi, says, Shannon, the ectoplasm photography for me is very delusional and can be misleading for the future generations when these photos are archived and no one is there to explain them. Do you have the intention to explain your work in a book? And Erica, there's a question for you. Very deep, enriching experience with layers of deep meaning. Oh, here we go. And Amar, I love the way you document the fleeting moments of war and the real human story, how the war has affected you. Those were 2 comments, but also a question for Shannon, and I think you can follow up with that.
Yes, so my book is actually out, and it's 300 pages, and there's a reason it's 300 pages is because I was very careful to frame the imagery historically. So my book is in 3 parts. The first part is a number of essays, one by the artist Tony Orsler, one by the archivist and curator Andreas Fischer, who's like an expert on this historical material, and one by myself, carefully explaining this historical frame. Then there are my images, and then which run in a sequence without text. And then the third part of the book is anecdote, or is every single picture explained with stories behind the picture, the historical meaning, historical notes in some cases, because that was part of the problem with the project, is I felt like I had to defend the topic in a way, because, and also that I was working with this outsider photographic history, this visionary. I mean, I think we're very much familiar in the art world with outsider or visionary art practice, but not so much with photography. And so there's a very careful frames around the images. So the book is a kind of a compendium.
Yeah, I have had a chance to look at her book. I really highly recommend it if you guys are interested in what she did today, because the book has so much depth and detail. So it's really incredible. And I think you can get it through Amazon. So you probably can bring it here to Dubai or the UAE. Amar, there's a question for you that says, is there a reason you don't have more photos from damage in and outside Damascus?
Yes, unfortunately, I couldn't access that area. I am from Damascus, and I wish I could go there more often and document what's going on. But unfortunately, that was not possible. I could go to Aleppo and to the north of Syria. But I hope to go very soon and document.
We hope so too. We hope it returns to a place that you can go and visit again. There's another question for you that asks whether you prefer to document common people, leaders, and celebrities. Which do you prefer?
I prefer all, to be honest. I prefer all. I mean, sometimes people tell me you took pictures of a mosque and then you take pictures of a naked woman, and how can you manage to do these? And I say, because I guess we're all like this. I mean, I guess we wake up in the morning and we can be angry, then we can laugh, then we can be sad, like we had tonight. I mean, Erica almost made us cry, and Shannon make us fear or be scared. And so I wouldn't like to be doing always leaders or always pop star, or I don't know, or just common people. I like the mixture of all of them. I like the humanity in everyone. And for some people, when we talk in humanity about Gaddafi or Assad or people like that, some people are angry and they say you can't talk about humanity about them. And I say, why not? They are not monsters. They're a human being. We might not like their behavior, but they are human beings and they deserve the humanity, and they deserve to be maybe one day tried or something like that.
Thank you. One final question that you're popular tonight, and they were just asking whether you have a website to view your works.
Unfortunately, my website has been hacked a few months ago, and with the COVID, etc., I'm rebuilding it, but it takes time. So I hope in September. But if you type my name in Google, you will find a lot of work, and Flickr also. You mentioned Flickr a bit earlier.
All right, maybe just one more question, and then we'll close up, since we've been here and have been enjoying. There's so much to talk about because everyone's practice is so different and everyone brings such amazing projects. I just want to keep asking and owing. I would just have one question from Lisa Ross. She's an incredible photographer in New York, and she says, I appreciate the long-term nature of each of your projects. Photography for each of you becomes a language like words are to a poet. It seems like the projects are more personal. The projects more personal to you are the ones you've spent more time on, living in places and learning the language of a place. How much for each of you do you feel you choose a project, and how much do you feel the project or body of work chooses you? Are there projects that choose you and that don't always move, and that you don't always move right into?
Erica, or Shannon?
I can.
Please.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like I feel like the projects are always a reflection of the themes in my own life. So those themes have been with me since I was born, and maybe like a parent when I was 6 years old or something like this. So yeah, I feel like in some reality that they are the reflections of things that I need to understand in order to become the person that I'm becoming, or that I already am and need to remember. So in that regard, I think there's not a lot of choice in it. What I do think there is the choice to go with it or feel the friction of it. So I think there was a part of that question, like, do you wait some time to do it? And so I think sometimes when we're not really ready to see that side of ourselves, which could be the collective, right? Like what you're talking about, war. I mean, this is these things that perhaps the West don't want to see. It's a side of themselves, right? It's a side of these things that we don't want to see within ourselves. So I think when we're not ready for that, then we engage in the opportunity for the projects in different ways, and perhaps it's in opposition to it, or you skirt around it until the core of it opens up. So, but at the end of the day, it will open up and you will have to confront it, I think. So I think, but I think they're always there. They are reflections of many aspects of ourselves.
Shannon? You just need to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I feel the project chose me in a strange way because it was started with such a deeply personal and strange experience. And then also, like I said, it turned me into a researcher and a writer as well, because it was such a complicated topic. And so for that, I am thankful. And I realize also too, it's a very taboo topic. I've also had a lot of, it's taken me a long time to be able to put it out in the world because of that. And it's an interesting, I almost feel lucky with the synchronicity now that's happening in the art world with the spiritualist artists such as Hilma af Klint, which was one of the most well-received exhibitions ever in the history of the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And the wall text actually talked about spiritualism. It used to be you would go to a museum and see a spiritualist painting and all of that context would not be on the wall. So I feel kind of lucky to be able to put out my book in a moment where there's more curiosity and interest in this complicated topic.
Wonderful. I think it now leaves me to thank our photographers for all of their incredible insight, and all of you attendees who have joined us through Zoom, and Barbara, Lena, and the Art Circle for offering us this platform that has really allowed us to dive into picturing the invisible. So thank you for sharing your time with us. Lena, is there anything else?
Yes, I just want to say, you know, that was really mind-boggling, and it was awesome how you could, I mean, all unite under this very intriguing title, and you totally took us to a different world. That was really, really magical. I just want to, on behalf of the Art Circle team, I would like to thank Shannon, Erica, Ammar, and Jolaine for a very delightful presentation, very engaging conversation. And I would like to thank our members and friends for their attendance. With this webinar, the last one of this season, I leave you hoping to resume again in September for more. Please bear in mind that if the world opens up again, we will be keeping our webinars, but with less intensity. So anyway, stay tuned for more from us, and don't forget to visit our website and our Instagram account, theartcircle.ae. Stay safe, stay tuned, and have a lovely summer holidays. So good night to everyone, and thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed.